All right. Good morning, everybody. Buenos días. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Buenos días y bienvenidos a todos. Welcome to Los Cien's Leadership and Identity, LGBTQIA+, Trailblazers here in Sonoma County. We're very excited to welcome all of you to hear the stories and perspectives of some of Sonoma County's preeminent LGBTQ leaders. And thank you so much to all of you for being here with us today. And before we get deep into our program, I have to make a quick announcement in Spanish. Buenos días y bienvenidos. Si necesita traducción, tenemos audífonos donde se puede escuchar toda la conversación traducida por la voz dulce de Betsy Chávez. Por favor, vayan a la mesa donde está Ellen y ella les puede ayudar con los audífonos. Muchísimas gracias a Betsy por su ayuda y por estar con nosotros esta mañana. También hoy es el Día de las Madres en México, entonces las celebramos, todas las madres, todas las personas que han dado luz. Gracias y las celebramos hoy. So we'd like to do a land acknowledgement to honor the people on whose unceded territory we are hosting this event, and we ask you out of respect to please stand for a moment. Today, Los Cien, Sonoma County, is humbled to bring us together on the lands of the Coast Miwok people. We celebrate the active work of their descendants to preserve and nourish their indigenous culture and identity. We acknowledge the Coast Miwok people as the traditional stewards and custodians of this region. We honor with gratitude the land itself, all of its ancestors, past, present, and future. Los Cien respects the enduring relationship that exists between today's Coast Miwok people and their traditional territories. Thank you all. So once again, thank you everyone for being here with us today. My name, I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Pat McDonell. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the program committee co-chair, along with my dear friend Ramon, who you'll hear from just in a moment. By day, I'm a housing attorney with Legal Aid of Sonoma County, and I serve on the board of Los Cien. Today's program could not have been made possible without our dynamic design team of volunteers. We want to quickly recognize those of you on the design team who are in the room. Please stand. Chase Overholt, Ana Maria Tamayo, who I think is at the registration table, Arlene Smith, and of course, Ramon. These programs are not easy to put on. It requires a lot of volunteer effort, so we thank you all. And now we want to welcome our community engagers and our parent organizations. If you are a parent or part of a community organization that is part of our Access Ticket program, please stand so we can welcome you. Do we have any parents, Access Ticket program folks? Well, if you're among us, thank you very much. Maybe they're all getting food. Now we would like to recognize our elected officials and elected representatives, especially the ones from the city of Petaluma who comped us this fine lunar base today. So if you're an elected official, please stand. Councilmember Posake, thank you for the city of Petaluma's contribution to today's event. We want to point out our looping slideshow, which is over here. To make sure that you know who our premier partners and sustaining members are, because without their investments and trust, we would not be able to do what we do. So thank you to everyone who supports these programs. And we want to give a special shout out to our program sponsors, our presenting sponsor, the United Way of the Wine Country, and our access sponsors, the City of Petaluma and Sonoma Community Action Network. So thank you to those organizations. Okay, and last reminder, and then Ramon's going to take over. All of our programs and informative events are being recorded by the Nexo Media team. This is exciting because it allows us to share these programs far beyond this room with our 3,000 followers and members, so everyone has an opportunity to listen to the conversations that we present. So we want to give a shout out to Hector Velasquez and the Nexo Media team. Thank you all. All right. And make sure you've got applause left for our speakers because they're coming on in a second. Now it is my honor to welcome my dear friend and the moderator for this program, Ramon Meraz, to take over for our conversation today. Welcome, Ramon.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to get in a little trouble right now. I'm going to go off script for just one second, which I'm already in trouble. About 14 years ago, I gave this speech. I'm going to try to remember, to los Cien. When you're Latino, you're sometimes invisible, right? When you're an immigrant, you're invisible, even within the Latino community. When you're LGBTQ+, you're invisible, and you are in the immigrant and in the Latino community, you're even more invisible. And when you are transgender and an immigrant and Latino, you are invisible within somehow invisible. So thank you for being here to be visible, and thank you for everybody who's going to be talking here to make sure that we are visible and we're part of the community. Times have changed, but we're going to be talking about that. So, thanks. We have a busy agenda, so I'm trying to I'll try not to deviate anymore. So, what has happened in our history, we have had to be resilient to going from the Stonewall demonstrations in New York in 1969 to the gay marriage in recent years. Yes, we have some gains, but it is scary right now. We can lose all these rights that we have fought for so hard. So more than ever, we need to be together. We need to be united, because that's where we get our strength. In order to revise and to know where we are, we need to visit the past. That's where we have some people who are going to come over. They're going to tell you and tell us their story. They're going to be vulnerable, because being vulnerable is what creates community. So please, I'm asking everybody, listen from the heart, because our speakers are here to speak from the heart. And that being said, we have to take what we listen to here and share it. We're going to record it, so it's available. Please come to our website and take the things that we have for you, not just this event, but every other event. Los Cien is always trying to make an impact in our community. So use the resources, please. Then, of course, I forgot everything I was going to say. That's what happens when you go out and live. So now, as we look towards the future, let us reaffirm our commitment to building a world together, where every person, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity, can live authentically and without fear. So again, thank you for being here. Now I would like to introduce our amazing keynote speaker, Dr. Angélica Garcia, Doctora Angélica Garcia, la presidenta of the Santa Rosa Junior College. She is an accomplished leader, scholar, and advocate. She has been a fellow with the Aspen Institute for the New Presidents, the National Community College Hispanic Council, and the UC Davis Wheelhouse Institute. She earned her doctorate in educational leadership at the San Francisco State University, a master's in social work at San Diego State University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in liberal and civic studies at St. Mary's College of California. So without further ado, where's Dr. Garcia? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right. Well, I keep thinking que son buenas tardes, but it's really buenos días. I'm so honored to be here, and I apologize to the folks that are on this side of the room. I didn't know that the slides were just going to be on one side, but as Ramon shared, the presentation will be made available. Before I begin, I want to thank Los Cien and Ramon and the whole crew for the invitation. I have, in the process of preparing for today, met some really amazing colleagues and new friends in the community, and I appreciate that Ramon grounded us in what it means to be vulnerable. Because I realized, like, I'm not afraid of public speaking. It doesn't usually make me nervous, but I've been really nervous about this one. And I realized it was because it's not about what I know in my head necessarily. It's about what I'm experiencing and feeling in my being as a person. And so that's the part. I was walking with my perrita Esperanza this morning and was like nervous. And I called some of my friends saying, I don't know why I'm so nervous. And one of them, he's also an out queer president down in Southern California. And he was like, Mommy, well, that's because, when we do the work of the work and when it's our head, we can kind of disassociate. But what you're offering is telling the story of when our head and our hearts combine. So it's with that spirit that I'm going to share some with you. In this particular image, this was last fall. This was my being, I was going to say inducted, but I don't think that's the appropriate. If it was my sister, she would say I got jumped into Santa Rosa Junior College. But my investiture, and to know me is to recognize that this image and what is happening in this image absolutely brings the intersection of all my identities. I don't know who's in charge of the slides. No tengo. Oh, is that you? Okay, órale. So it's already been said. Feliz Dia de las Madres. I know they're saying Mexicanos, which my mom I had a conversation with her, but I'm not sure if it's all of Latinoamérica. So Feliz Dia de las Madres to all Latinoamericanas. In this picture, Maria Soto Cabrera is my grandmother, and that look right there, that was her chair in the kitchen. Siempre en la cocina. She passed away several years ago. My mommy, Angélica, that's when she came for the investiture. So I think that's what we look like the next morning. On the bottom left is my sister, Irene. She's my oldest sister, and that's during one of our tamaladas. So I think we paused to take a picture. In the middle there is me and my lovely wife, Maria Capitelli, who's here. And on the far right is our family picture with our matching queer pajamas, is what we call them. Even SB had one. And I put Happy Mother's Day to my two moms because we have two girls, and so much about what it means to start having the space of inclusivity is allowing our young children in their educational spaces to have their families be fully recognized. And so I am grateful that our daughters have been in classrooms where teachers have made a point to recognize that they have two moms and not make them feel othered. And I realize that's not something that all children of blended families get to have. So to all of us out here. And this also goes for whether you carried the baby or not, because let me tell you, anybody who knows me knows I do not like being in pain. I am grateful to be a mama, but that was all Maria. That was all her. All right, next slide. So this is just a little picture of me. I love this one. I think I look so cute. But in the back, one of the reasons I love it is that right next to me is my abuelita, and that's my mom over on the table. And I realize as a young person, that's kind of all you see walking around the house. You just see from pancita down. And so, and they are incredibly important in the part of what was my journey, because it was a lot of love, care, support, apoyo, right, all of that. And also because of our cultural, I grew up in a very large Mexican Catholic family, and so being other than what your Mexican large Catholic family wants you to be is hard, whatever it looks like. So next, por favor. I'm sorry for this. This is really tiny. This is almost cruel for those of you that are in the back. But I always like to begin with what informs my leadership perspective. And so I've spent a lot of time between going to school, but also just engaging in rich dialogue with folks about what walks in with me when I walk into a room. And so here's what you all need to know about what walks in with me. My leadership perspective is informed by my cultural, ethnic, familial, and regional context. And it centers my gendered and racial experience. So whether I'm meeting you at the grocery store or at a PTA meeting or at this event, that is how I view the world when I walk through it. And so through that, I shared, matriarchal family. I'm originally from the Central Valley. I'm from Fresno, yes. Thank you. Grew up in a very poor community, and then we became working class. So that felt really good, kind of moving up in the social ladder there. Second generation born in the U.S., I identify as Chicana. And so that's something that I'm really clear about, because for me, especially being in farm country, the work and culturalmente, it's all about advocacy and activism. And so that's very connected for me. I'm a daughter, sister, tia, prima. I still identify as an athlete, even though I don't look like one anymore, but I learned a lot being a student athlete. A first-generation college student, part of the LGBTQ community, a wife, a mama, and a first-generation professional. Now, I know we're supposed to be talking about the LGBTQIA+. We're going to get there. On the far left, or on your right, the other thing that informs me is, because I'm an educator and I'm in this field, it's not lost on me that my standing up here with a doctorate, with the level of education that I have, is still, sadly, an anomaly for many young people who look like me. So there's a lot of scholarly research, and the presentation is the link, but in this image, just to kind of shortcut it for you, there are scholars down at UCLA, Danny Solorzano, who's been doing some work looking at educational pipeline. And so they follow 100 elementary school students, and they use the US Census data to show how they progress through education. On the far left, you start with 100. At the very bottom where it says doctorate, it's 0.3. So out of every 100 Latino, Latina, Latine students, 0.3 will get to a doctorate. So I am a representation of 300 young people starting their journey, and that's me right here, right? Because I'm more than 0.3 of a person, I'd like to believe. So the research goes on, and it takes different ethnic groups, it goes into it, and then even within the Latino community, it breaks it down, because it's more, it shows the difference even between Centroamericanos, Salvadoreños, Cubanos, Puerto Ricanos, Mexicanos. So, but that's not on this slide. Okay, next. Oh, this is my casita. This is where I grew up. Well, honestly, this was my grandma's house, and now my mom lives here. I grew up in all kinds of places. I grew up in apartments. For a short time, my mommy and I were in a car. But this house right here, está viejita, like it's so old, but I love this house because only now in my life am I able to say that that house simultaneously held places where I felt the most love, but it's also where I've experienced some of the most pain in my life. And it is hard to honor that, right? Because I told you, I'm a Latina, I'm a Mexicana. And so we're not supposed to talk about our family anything other than how amazing they are. And so that can be true along with, that shit was hard. Sorry, that was hard as well in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and just wanted to leave you with the image. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I am an educator. I'm a teacher at heart. So one of the things for me is a recognition, again, that I stand here because there were young children and their families who came together and said the educational experience they were having was not equitable and was not fair. So this one, if you don't know about the Lemon Grove Grammar School incident down in the San Diego area, do yourself a favor and read up on this, because this became the first successful school desegregation court decision in the United States. Not a lot of people know that. There's one little Mexicanito right there in the middle, and his name was Robert Alvarez. His family was the big one. This was during the time when Mexican schools were popular in the state of California. And then that led to support Mendez v. Westminster. Again, same time where 80% of Mexican-American students attended Mexican schools. And notice, 1946, that's not too long ago. Right, so Ramon was saying, like, we've made progress, but it's really not that long ago. This set the foundation for Brown versus Board of Education, which then Civil Rights Act of 1957. I put this here because when we pay attention to our young people and we pay attention to our communities, we actually find the answers about what we're supposed to do. Pass this one. Okay, so Ramon read the CV of my educational journey. So can I move around? I know that there's a video, but I'm feeling very stuck here. Okay, all right. So I went to St. Mary's College of California, because remember, I told you, Mexican Catholic girl. And so I wanted to go away to school. And the only way that my family would let me go away is if I went to a Catholic college. And that worked for me in so many ways. But here's where I get to the part about where my life starts to change. Because at this point, I'm an athlete. I've had a couple boyfriends by this point. And in this opportunity to learn and explore and get to know other people, I've made some really great friends. And I met this person, and her name was Maria. And my full name is Maria Angélica, just para la mera neta, right, to mix it up. So I meet this really amazing person, and we become friends. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I think I want to kiss this friend. Is it normal to want to kiss your friends like that? And it was, I didn't have the language. I didn't have anyone that looked like me. And even at my college, the groups that were kind of student-led, they were mostly white gay males. And so it did not look like a place where I would go to. So in this evolving friendship, we come to learn that there's this whole underground community at the college. And the underground community is where folks of color were coming together, student athletes. And again, we find community and you find space. And the way Ramon said earlier about feeling invisible. It was a way to not feel invisible, but trust. These were happening late at night. They were happening hidden. You kind of had to know someone to get there. And I remember the first time we walked into that space and everyone's like, because then you realize you're not alone. And then all of a sudden now I was like, there's another Latina in this room. How the hell are you doing this, right? Or there's another person that's from the Central Valley. What is that about? So that really for me became a time where I felt liberated in a lot of ways, but even more shoved into this invisible closet. So it was hard to feel that in one part of this community, I felt like my story could evolve, but still having to play the role in another one. Now, I will say that being a woman of color, being Latina, I feel like the surviving kind of racist, sexist kind of tendencies prepared me already for it, but I didn't have the language, so that was part of what we were figuring out. There's a lot that happens before I go to San Diego State, but what I want to say here is by the time I get to San Diego State, at this point, here's the fast forward part. Came out to my mom. It was painful, and we spent the better part of a year not really being able to talk. Because for her, it was culturalmente, she thought that there was something that she did wrong. There was something that she thought that because she and my father split up, that it was something about her. And so, again, as a caring daughter, I was taking care of her feelings. No, mamita, it's not you. While also feeling really sad that she just instantaneously felt differently. So I will give her credit. We still talked. I don't think I've talked about the weather so much the way I did during that year, but it's what we could handle, right? It's what we could handle. And while I'm feeling, while there's a sense of vulnerability, I will say that there are some parts of a coming out story that other people get to hear, and there are some parts that are just not, because that pain is real, and what it means to face someone who your entire life has said, I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I want to support you now, say, because of who you love. I can't do that, right? So we'll go ahead and move on. Do this. I'm glad you're a timekeeper, because I am way behind. So what I've been talking about and sharing is the intersectionality of identities. I should have started at the beginning by saying that this wasn't going to be a gender studies or a queer studies class. You got to do your own work. But I do want to recognize that as a cisgender woman, I have a lot of privileges within the queer community. I am a comfortable queer person for most folks, except for when I talk about my family and the assumption about, oh, what does your husband do? I'm like, my wife is a therapist, very good one. And so you're constantly coming out. And those of us, you're going to hear from amazing folks, we're in these roles where I never thought so much about my queer identity until I moved to this county, because I was in the East Bay. And most of the conversations were around being first gen and being Latina and being the first in your family to go to college, and being a woman, and coming into this county, I'm recognizing that my identity as a queer woman is carrying a lot more responsibility, which is a privilege, but it also feels really heavy sometimes, because it's like, well, dang, I better not mess up. Right, and I'm used to thinking that because of my brown skin. I'm used to thinking that because I'm poor, or grew up poor. This one is a new one for me. So this is an evolving part of my identity. La otra, por favor. We can just move that one. Okay, this one I do. You do need to see this. So the following slides I'm going to share, there is no way you're going to see them now. You over there, just save yourself. So the California Community College did a basic needs survey where they asked students, I'm trying to address housing insecurity and food insecurity. Next slide, por favor. And so you cannot see this, but I'm going to read this to you. In the respondents, there were 88 community colleges that responded. Santa Rosa Junior College also had students that responded. And what I want to share here, what changed, is that 5% of the respondents identified as transgender. And overall in the whole sample, 2 out of every 3 community college students grapple with at least one basic need. And LGBTQ plus students are much more likely to report insecurities. The next slide has more data, so when you get this, you will see. But the highlights here is for amongst the queer community, our transgender students are by far the most impacted, most likely to be homeless, most likely to be housing insecure, and they are most likely, in all honesty, they then increases over into rates for mental health around suicide and suicidal ideation. So when you get the chance to see this, where that's changed just from 2019, we were reporting at 1% transgender students to now 5%. Many of us are venturing that that's much higher, but even in that particular jump. Y luego, mira, la mera neta, I have to come over here because this one is so small. Of the whole population, because I was hoping to point to it when I was here, this section, when you get to it, shows bisexual, gay, lesbian. I think this is heterosexual or straight. I love that line right there. Y luego esta, I can't even read it. It's too close. But not sure? Okay, thank you. And so what you're going to see, this line is food insecure, housing insecure, and homelessness. So these numbers right here, I just want you to know for transgender students, 74% food insecure, 38%. Are you doing that or is that me? Oh my gosh. Anyway, so I told you I was an educator, I'm a nerd, but that is telling. And for someone who's in my role at a community college, I have to know about this. And I have to make sure that our colleagues know about this, teachers, board of trustees, community members know about this. because the work that we have to do at the JC is to recognize that if we can't do this on our own, we have to partner with many of you out in this room in order to serve our students. Next slide, por favor. I'm like really moving. Okay, keep going. Hermana here, she's good. Okay. I feel like there's so much more to share, but go on the next one. Está bien aquí. So one of the pieces in recognizing kind of what it means to be in this role, we talk about, a lot of firsts. So the first female superintendent president that the college has seen in 105 years. It's a really long time. No pressure. No pressure. It's all good. The first Latina. Again, no pressure. And I put here just first out because I don't know. A lot of people, I shouldn't say that. I know my predecessor is married to a very lovely friend, Lena, so I'm not saying that about Dr. Chong, but I'm putting it here because unless you share that as part of your identity of being out, I don't know, but I am, in this sense, kind of the first out. And I'm not the only one in our county, so I will tell you it means something to me to have other colleagues in public, especially in public education spaces, because there's this element of a recognition of, I know you're gonna, Amie and I having a conversation about, so not only is it how are we addressing things as women, but as queer women, and then, racial differences that we have. And that is tiring, right? That's the part that a lot of folks, when you get to just be part of the majority of any group, you don't have to do so much work, right? And so that's the tiring part. But I will tell you that I also want to recognize that as as I stand here, I didn't get to this point on my own. So there were other really amazing mujeres, queer folks who paved the way, who took the bigger hits, if you will. And so there's a colleague in the room. No sé dónde está. ¿Dónde está? There she is. There she is. I'm going to say her name in just a moment, but I want to tell you about this person. So this person is in the community in Sonoma County, was a seasoned administrator in the California community colleges, was an equity warrior, an equity champion, and was I think the first person in the entire California community college system who came out and lived her life as such. And anyone who has been through what it means to be questioned because of your sexuality, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, so to be questioned, to be undermined, to now be told that you may or may not be ready for this job, for someone to hear that and say, psh, and still do the work. And this is someone that, as I was thinking of coming into this county, was incredibly important to me, because I knew that aside from all the titles and all the roles, she was able to have a conversation with me about, look, if you're going to come here and you're going to be with your family, you didn't say this part, that I was going to be talking about this to, an entire group here, but she did share, right, and help me see. And so I know I'm being recognized as a trailblazer, but look, hermanas, I don't get to stand here if Rosa Perez doesn't have this, doesn't do the work beforehand. And so if you don't know this woman, please make it your business to know this woman. Yeah. 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 I love that you all just did that. Thank you. I'm at the last part here. I don't know if there's another picture. I don't even care. No, go back, that one. No, mira nomás. The one that has the 3 pictures. I'm totally deflecting now because I don't want to cry, but I think it's going to happen anyway. My 2 daughters are going to get to live a different life. I have a 14-year-old. We have a 14-year-old and an almost 9-year-old. And they live in a blended family. They live with 2 parents who love them, who are very complicated. I keep hoping and praying that doing this work in partnership with all of you will mean that as they grow up, as they are in these spaces, they don't have to feel that how their family looks is wrong, or that who they love is wrong, or that how they love determines their value and their worth. Because to raise strong young women in this community, in this society, in this world right now, and I'm not negating for my hermanos, my male brothers in the room. I don't know what it's like to be a man, so I'm not speaking to that. But to raise young women to be good people, to just be good people and care and be here. Like, I want a world to nourish them through that. And I know that my wife and I, we're going to do our part, but I need you all to do your part. Not just for my kids, but for all of our children in this county. Thank you. I don't know what to do with this.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I did interview Dr. Garcia for La Voz, and that's still coming up, and I hope you read it because it's a lot more than she didn't say today that I would love to share with you. So if we can have the panelists come in while we're coming in, thank you. We'll introduce you. And in the meanwhile, a couple of things. If you have any questions, please use the QR code. Do we have the QR code somewhere? There it is. So, yeah, you're going to have to... Yeah, if you want to have any questions, this is a good time to come over and get the QR code. But also a couple other things. There is Petaluma Fairgrounds photo project going on outside. If you're a member of the community of Petaluma, they want to capture you and they want to talk to you. So you have a chance after the event, you can come over there. And then Herman already said, but La Fiesta al Cien coming up on May 31st. If you haven't gotten your ticket, you still have time. If you want to donate, we're gonna have raffles. It's gonna be a fun event. We're gonna be supporting the LGBTQ plus therapy fund, which is part of Positive Images. Is that correct? Yeah, and on the margins. So please keep that in mind. Be aware. Participate. So our panelists we have today. Ron Gomez, who is the founder of the Roanoke Park and Cotati Pride, an activist. And then we have Dr. Amie Carter, with Sonoma County Office of Education. We have Chris Mahurin right here, that's Lieutenant Chris Mahurin. Absolutely. Then Grace, and I'm blanking the last name. De La Puerte, a very proud Filipina and a friend of mine and member of the Pride Committee. So, and then we have Josh Kinapato, did I say that right? Crocker, yes, and she's with the Sonoma County Superior Court. So I'm going to let themselves tell you about themselves. And the first question is for everybody. Let me see if I can put it over here. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, your role, and what leadership means to you as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. We can start with Ron. Is that working?
How about now? Yay. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Ramon, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cien, and all the leaders. I'm looking at a room full of lions and lionesses, and I was looking for a non-binary word for lions, but I couldn't think of a good one, so we'll work on that. I am, as Ramon said, founder of Roanoke Park Pride and Cotati Pride. I'm actually co-founder with my beautiful wife, Sid, and I use she and they pronouns. Thank you.
Hi, Amy Carter. I'm the Sonoma County Superintendent of Schools. My pronouns are she, her. And I think for me, leadership really is, we know we're all here standing on the shoulders of people who sacrificed so much. And we're in a state that in 1978 had a ballot measure to eliminate educators that were queer from even having employment. And in 2008 in the state, we had a voting ballot about whether we could even have the right to marry, and the state voted to take that away from us so we couldn't have that, and the Supreme Court intervened. And all of that is what we stand on, and I think we know how fragile everything that we have is, and how, everything we've gotten has taken so much work. And so I think leadership for me is taking that and just being unrelenting about the fight.
My name is Chris Mahurin. I'm a lieutenant with the Santa Rosa Police Department. I'm the first ever promoted LGBTQ person in the city's history in law enforcement. My pronouns are he, him, and ginger. And leadership to me is really individualistic. It means somebody who is capable of being who they are authentically every day. Sometimes that authenticity is in your own bedroom because you can't do that outside yet, but as long as you can live that to your fullest extent, to the best of your ability in each of those moments, that to me is what leadership is. Because if you can't be who you are, pushing that every single day for you, doesn't have to be for anybody else, then you can't be that leader that you truly want to be. So being who you are is the first step to being a great leader, in my opinion.
My name is Grace Villafuerte. I'm a second-generation Filipino-American immigrant to Sonoma County, born and raised here. And leadership to me is a lot of things. First, knowing the history of whatever community you're part of, and also listening to all the diverse needs of the different members within that community as best you can. And then also bringing the intersectionality of all your identities as best as you can, as safe as you can, to all places in your life.
And I'm Keena Patel Crocker, and forgive me, I have notes, but so does she. But sorry. No, we were talking about it, and we have so much to share, and we don't want to forget anything. So anyhow, so my pronouns are she, her, and in thinking about leadership, I recall that I was looking, when I figured out that I was lesbian, I was looking for leaders, and I don't think I even realized that I was. And when I was in San Francisco in law school, I went to City Hall for a marriage equality rally, and the National Center for Lesbian Rights was there, and the executive director, Kate Kendall, was speaking passionately about the issue, something I had never heard of being from the South, that it was even a possibility. And having leaders, I believe, inspire. They coach and guide, but they also inspire. And in that moment, I thought, I really want to use my law career for helping people, which is what I hope I have done along the way. But I have a colleague on the bench who told me, you can't be what you can't see. So I think that's what leadership, the value that leadership holds.
Thank you, everybody. So this question is for everybody. Can you please share what was it like coming out? What was your story like coming out to the world, to your family, but also professionally? Can anybody tell stories or share?
Well, I have a gay friend who, when I came out as transgender, I didn't know where I fit. I just knew that I had been assigned male at birth, related to myself as a man, and never fit. And he said, "You'll be coming out for the rest of your life now." And I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I'm coming out day by day, week by week. Here I am in front of a whole room full of people. And I'm a trans, non-binary woman who relates as a lesbian. And I am finding myself every day in my community, in my home, in my heart, in my relationships, in my family, and in my marriage. So today, I guess I'm a LGBTQ trailblazer. Thank you. So I'll tell some future group what it's like to come out to you today, but here I am coming out. One more time.
Invite Rowan to this question, but
Well, my story, I grew up in Orem, Utah, in a full Mormon community. And so when people ask me, like, when did you know you were gay? Like, for me to even contemplate that, like, it'd be like if someone was like, do you think you're a giraffe? It was just like, there was just no part of my mind that would even think that way. So I followed the traditions of the religion. I got married at 18. I had 5 kids. And went to church one day and bumped into somebody that I had feelings for and started to realize, like, oh, wow, like there's this whole world. But for me, coming out, having built this platform around religion and my heritage, right, to come out, that's... you lose everyone who you've ever thought was a friend. Your family members don't know what to do with you because now you're going to hell. You're dangerous. You're a threat. And so, like, the fact that we have learned how to create communities with one another is the true lifesaver, because that moment, for me, really untethered me from everything, every relationship, everything meaningful in my life that existed prior.
So I came out December 18th, 1999. I remember that date very clearly. I told my mom, she was the first person I told. She told me she's going to lock up her closet at that point from me. It was a hard experience for me. My mom and dad were great parents. My mom was the worst about it initially for a lot of years. She's fantastic now. So is my dad. He passed away, but he was great about it. My mom in particular, for a couple of years, she would call me a disgrace. My younger brother was a year behind me in high school, and she's like, think about the impact you're having on him and the way he's going to get teased about this. And then for whatever reason, I don't know what it was to this day, but something just hit me like a wrecking ball. I went to school in Petaluma with Melanie back here, about halfway back. I wasn't a popular kid. I wasn't an outcast either. I was just kind of an average, normal kid. But something switched in me, and I became a wrecking ball, and I refused to be something I wasn't. So when prom came, I didn't have a boyfriend. I never really had one, but I was like, I will bring a man to prom with me. And so sure enough, I had a friend of a friend. He was like, yep, I'll go to prom with you. I'm super happy to do it. He just happened to model for Abercrombie & Fitch, so it wasn't a bad photo. But the reason I tell that story, other than him being attractive back in the day, was because I will never forget this moment. It was the most pivotal moment in my entire being as a queer person that changed my perspective that anyone can be wonderful and human and caring. Was at our prom. Peter, taller than I was at the time, he was like, hey, why don't we have a slow dance? Because I was dancing with the girls, my friends. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. So we slow danced. I put my head down for some reason, started spinning in a circle in a slow dance. And I don't know what happened, but I opened my eyes, and our senior class was circled around us, clapping and cheering. And I felt that was the first time in high school in those 2 years I felt accepted. And I knew if in high school in Petaluma, California, at Casa Grande, in the late 90s when queer wasn't everywhere, if I can make it through that moment, I could make it through anything. So that was part of it for me.
You're so cute. When I came out to myself, I was 21. I'd moved to San Diego for college. I got my bachelor's in social work. Yay, at San Diego State. I was 21, and it was, it was started with a crush, as often they do. It was a surprise to me, and it's funny because like some of my parents and my high school friends were like, oh yeah, there's something about Grace. I'm not going to tell you now, but and like I was surprised. I didn't know. And when I came out, it was 96. I'm almost 49er era. And Defense of Marriage Act was in the news. And so it was just like this really weird, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know any other LGBT folks. This was like, I didn't have internet access yet quite. And so for me, the only places to go to find other LGBT folks were the bars and LGBT only spaces like women's festivals, etc. And I've always said, so this was 96, I've always said I'm glad when I came out there was still discrimination because I was forced to go to these spaces and be around all of us were there, right? I was usually the youngest person there, so I got to meet and know, and I'm still really good friends with all the pioneers of our community, all genders, all sexual orientations. It was beautiful because we were all together. We had to be together because we couldn't go to mainstream areas. And talking about coming out, I feel like I never came out in some ways. Like my high school friends, I just came back to town and I'm like, I'd start talking about girls and like they'd get the idea, And then, I'm with Sonoma County Pride. I'm very out there. And I never came out to my parents. I never came out to my family. And I think that the point is coming out looks different for people in different cultures, etc. My parents knew. They loved my partner, my late partner. They called her more than they called me. They held birthday parties for her, not me, but that's okay. And then, when we had our celebration of life in the obituary, it says, Lynn's partner, Grace, so they knew and they loved us and they never said partner or, wife or anything like that. And for me, that is way more that I could ever have imagined having a life, with my parents being that accepting, as well as my entire family. So I think that, when people say coming out, there's like that whole, reality bites moment, like mom, dad. It doesn't look like that for everybody. It doesn't look like that for a lot of cultures, etc. I'm done.
So I realized I was lesbian in college. I was 20. And as probably we have all done, we look back and like, there were signs maybe around 10, maybe even earlier. And it was ugly. I told my mom first and it did not go well. I was disowned from my family and it took a long time for us to heal. Some of us never did. So, and I came into this space today knowing that I would be amongst community, I would be amongst friends, and in a safe space. But I didn't realize that I would have, I don't even know how to describe it. What Dr. Garcia, when you were up here talking about your coming out, there are so many similarities. I'm from an Indian family, and the same thing happened. My mom was like, what did I do wrong? Because I divorced your dad. Is that what happened? What is that was a black stain on the family already, and here's the second black stain. And I feel a kinship with you because of that, and I appreciate you giving that to me today. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Into the meat and potatoes here. So this question is going to be for Chris, Rowan, Dr. Carter. And can you share what coping mechanisms have you used, especially when you have faced rejection? And then among them, which ones have been the most useful?
Yeah, so for me, coping mechanisms are obviously different for everyone. I work in a very conservative field. I don't know if you know about that about law enforcement. Being the only out gay male they've hired in 18 plus years, there's a lot of feels that go along with that. Not that they haven't tried to hire more, not that some haven't applied, but I was the first one and I've been the only one there for 18 years that's been open about who I was. My biggest fear wasn't actually worrying about going and doing these crazy calls and the things that we see. My biggest fear was actually the locker room, was actually that moment when I knew I was going to have to switch into a uniform and do what I have to do and there's other men around me. And this fear was like I found out very quickly that several men would tell me to my face, you don't belong in our locker room, you need to go in the women's locker room or go in the bathroom and be away from us. And I remember thinking like maybe this isn't the place for me, but then all of a sudden I started to stand up just a little for myself, but still was new, so I was quiet about it. But then watching these older officers, not these young guys, these older officers telling him to back off, let him do his job, finding that support within those people. The biggest thing for me as I've done this for 18 years is giving people grace. A lot of people who are ignorant don't know a gay person. So giving them that space to actually have a conversation, open up, give them an opportunity to grow. Take some chances where you have them where like, I have set boundaries. You will not go past my boundaries. I will put you in check for that. And we will have a conversation about it. But ultimately, if I don't give a little bit of that grace, I feel like they're not going to learn and feel open to having those conversations. So for me, it was finding where my lines are, not letting people cross my boundaries and making them clear, but also giving people the grace and the opportunity to ask questions, be present, and ultimately hopefully evolve their beliefs and the way they feel.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most difficult times was just going back to 2008 and just having Prop 8 everywhere. I worked in Central Valley, and so like as I'm going to teach people's children, I'm driving to work, and it's just like every yard is just saying that you don't have the right to marry the person that you love. And then I had to shake that off and care for these children. And I was so terrified that I was going to lose my job that I was closeted for about 5 years. And that is just so, so lonely. So I think the coping strategies that I've eventually found is just being amongst community, having people that you can talk to. I agree, just being able to depersonalize it. You know, my children would always get defensive and, you know, on my behalf. And part of what I explain to them is like when people look at me and that's what comes up for them, that has nothing to do with me. It's like it's like a, you know, some puppet that they're interacting with that has nothing to do with me. But it takes a long time to sort of separate yourself from that hurt. But when you can and you start to just look at individuals with their own baggage and the opportunity to kind of help walk them on a journey. So many of the people that rejected me in my life had religion-based and ideas that were based on, you know, these virtues that they held dear. And so those interactions were just really painful. And so it was always nice to come back to community and have that sense of care around us. And that's really what it takes to get through.
For me, can you see that I'm in a wheelchair? I use it sometimes, yeah. I'm also neurodivergent, which is another minority that we don't know that much about. We tend to be hidden or we hide. So it's a big deal for me to have an accessibility ramp and to be up here today. It's also a big deal for me to say that part out loud. And it's important because we each have our own ways of taking care of ourselves and being acknowledged. When you're transgender, you spend a lot of your life hiding and pretending. When you're neurodivergent, you spend a lot of your life masking and camouflaging. When you're disabled, you spend a lot of time staying home and they won't include me, and then come to find out there's people that didn't put a ramp up because they didn't think any of us existed. Yeah, we do. But for me, when I have a setback or anything bad, really, my coping mechanism is to deepen my relationship to that pain, to feel it more and more. I used to run from it. Now I sit with it and let it speak to me and through me. And if I need to cry and hug myself, I do. And then relentlessly and persistently getting up and doubling down on what I'm really committed to in life, for my community, for my family, for my city, and for my world. And then increasing my investment in the people that invest in me, the people that care for me.
Well, for the next question, this is for Grace and Josh Patel Crocker. You already shared about coming out to yourself and just coming out. But at one moment, did you realize that you're going to be facing some discrimination, hardship in order to be who you are and do the work that you do? And can you tell us any specific stories or anything that you want to share about that process?
You're nodding your head already. So as I said, I grew up in the South from age 2 to 22. And I lived in an Indian community. Surprisingly, there's a lot of people in this particular area in Tennessee that are Indian. And a lot of them came over from Africa, India, England, and left immediate family behind. And so, the purpose was to have a life that had more opportunities for them and for future children. So in this community, we were quite in a bubble. There were, over 100 of us, and these were my aunts and uncles, and we did call them auntie and uncle because this became our family. But within this bubble, it was a protective bubble, but it also was laden with expectation. You certainly were to focus on your studies. Don't look at boys. These were the messages. Get through school. You have time to date later after college, and so that was the message that we were given, and also that you're to become a doctor or a lawyer. 2 options. And but at the same time, you're supposed to marry a man. First problem for me. Second problem, and my family was actually considered to be somewhat progressive because they said you have to marry a man, but it doesn't have to be from the same caste. It doesn't have to be a Patel. So we are the progressive parents, which in some sense they were. So that was the expectation. And it was hard for me. See, I have to check my notes because I'll go off script. I knew because of all of that I was going to face adversity the moment that I figured out that I was lesbian. It was very early on. And we are very much, in the community, your focused role is very strictly gendered. You are to do all of those things, create a family, take care of your family, also carry your career, be a dutiful daughter-in-law. So I knew from the very get-go that this was going to be a challenge, and it was.
Dun, dun, dun. When I first read this question, I think we can all answer many times we have faced adversity, but when I first heard this question, the first thing that came to mind was when my partner passed and looking for support or groups, widowed groups to join, and none that, I'll start with, I think growing up in Sonoma County, as a Filipino American, I learned without even knowing it that I compartmentalized my different identities. My Filipino, I grew up at the Filipino Center, I always say, so I spent a lot of time there, had a very strong Filipino American community. And then when I came out, I kept my lesbianness over here, and then, and I was very comfortable, it made everyone else comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that I had my internalized homophobia and my internalized racism, so I, wasn't ready to kind of look at everything together. And then when my partner passed, I lost all filters. I didn't care about making other people feel comfortable, etc. But when I went looking for like a widow group or a grief support group, it was already uncomfortable being younger, right? And then there were none for LGBT folks, and so it was just really challenging. And when when somebody's already trying to get help that they don't even want to get help, they don't want to be in this position, it was just another layer of pain to not find one where I could find my people. And so, I'm still looking for the unicorn of a Filipino lesbian widow out there. But over time, it's been 9.5 years, and so in this time with a few of my widow friends, we've created a really strong and large weekly LGBT widow Zoom group of and it's all from a few days widowed to 9-10 years widowed. So that's all.
Where we go?
This question is for everybody. So, what can leaders today do to prevent similar adversities from being placed on up and coming queer professionals and students? What would you think that they need for support?
I'd say my quick answer, and I'll pass it on, is if for people who feel safe to do so and comfortable enough within themselves to do so, talk about stuff all the time. Talk about yourself, talk about your experiences, your communities, talk about grief, talk about being gay and Asian, talk about things that people just are awkward or uncomfortable around, because it starts to normalize these conversations. People at least will hear it. Maybe they're not comfortable participating yet, but they'll hear words, and it just starts to normalize stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how many people were uncomfortable when I would talk about, my dead wife, but now we can talk about grief. The American culture is so uncomfortable with talking about topics.
I'll just put a quick plug in for the organizations that we have in our community. We have Voices, we have Positive Images. There's groups that you can go to and meet people, so you can have these conversations and be vulnerable and be open. There's also mentorship programs out there, which are very helpful. I know in particular for the legal community, the Sonoma County Bar Association has a Pipeline Pods program where they match up high school, college, law school students with an attorney and a judge, and everybody mentors all the way up and down the chain. So these are good opportunities for you to meet people and talk about things if you're interested.
Lean into the people in your community. Look for those resources that exist. We're only 5 people who come from 5 very different backgrounds, but there's a whole audience full of queer people with a lot of diverse experiences. Someone is going to relate slightly to your experience or be able to provide you or guide you that opportunity to kind of gain that leadership moment, or really someone to confide in, whether it's for grief when the LGBT community, or it's because you're going into other professions that you don't know. You're not going to find it on Grindr probably, but there's other places in our community that will help out with that. But don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help, because you're not suffering alone, because there's other people in that same spot that you are. So in order to kind of get that help that you need, reach out to the communities that you see. Because a lot of us who are doing what we do now for a living didn't see people like us in the past. And so when you start to see people that look like you or act like you, or you want to emulate, whether it's career-wise or personal life or whatever that may be, reach out to those people, see if they can give you those connections, see if they can mentor you, see if they can provide you a resource, but don't be afraid to reach out when you need something or when you want something, because you deserve it. If you want it, it should be yours. Go after what you want.
Yeah, I'll just really echo that mentorship idea, and that you do have to see it to believe it. I have 2 master's degrees and a doctorate, and never once in all those years of schooling did I ever have an instructor that was openly queer. And that is just, and I was hungry for it. I was seeking for it, and it was just absent. So I think now there's like a responsibility, and I think in our community there are people who have access to privilege a lot quicker than others do. There's like a sort of a circle that's okay in society for our queerness, and there's people that are outside that circle that are still part of our community. And so it would always piss me off when I would find someone who was in the circle of accessibility but wasn't advocating for others, right? They got there and pulled up the ladder. So I think we have a responsibility to just be unrelenting even when we do have access to power. When I ran for office, there were people that are like, well, are you going to run open? Like, yes, of course, right? We need that visibility, and we all just need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until everyone truly has a place at the table.
Yeah, so much great wisdom. I think I also want to shout out to the organization Amor Para Todos, Love for All, that operates in our schools down here and tries to make our schools safer with anti-bullying and bathroom access. Also Petaluma Pride, of course. Come on. For me, it's like if you garden at all, or if you like gardening, or if you just can deal with the metaphor, sometimes weeds can be really frustrating. Weeds and pests can be really frustrating, and you have to fight them. But sometimes just taking care of the plants that are giving you food, watering the flowers, and giving the flowers, sharing the beauty. Find that little place in your life where you could take just one extra step to acknowledge somebody, to make their life a little easier, to compliment them, to stand up for them. And sometimes make a bigger step. Just find something at your school or your work or your church where you can say, I really think the Bible says love everybody. We have churches like that, St. John's in Rohnert Park. I really think our school should have a pride flag because queer kids deserve to feel safe. Right? And sometimes it's just that one person in your family that you can see them nodding along with racist, sexist, transphobic, homophobic, misogynistic bullshit. And you can take that moment to tell them, brother, I don't really agree with you. My friend, I don't think that's a good way to go. So pardon my language, but sometimes I think we have to feel a little passion, fire if you feel it, gentle if that's your style, but just looking for those one little to say to somebody, you're safe. What that person said was wrong. And then if you can, stand up to them and tell them.
Well, this question is for Rowan and Grace. So what do you think that people can do during this Pride Month to raise awareness about the issues that we have discussed, including during the festivities?
It's a lot of the stuff we've already been talking. Talk about your experiences, and I think we've all talked about this also. Representation matters, and I think for all of us who are older, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't see us, people who looked like us, out in the open. So I know for folks this month, talk about your experiences, because chances are you're going to be able to connect with somebody, or somebody will hear your story and you sharing and be like, oh, I can relate to that, but I'm not ready to talk about it. And then also connect with folks who have completely different backgrounds from you, or from a different generation, etc. Because it's these connections, it's these relationships that that make up our community. And I think that as we have become more accepted or mainstream, we have the ability to stay in our little silos now. But connect with, we're such a diverse group. We have a lot of disagreements and differences, but we can get past that if we just keep the conversation and the communication open.
So who loves the fabulous parties that are Pride in our community, right? Who loves Sonoma Pride, Santa Rosa Pride? Who loves it? Who loves to come out and see the colors and the dance and the music and all of it? Who loves that? There's another side, is that who loves and notices all the agencies that come out to offer mental health, to offer legal aid, to offer food assistance, to offer open doors, people that need it. And that's the other side. We have the sparkly wonder that is all of us, right? But these are opportunities for us to come together in the daylight and seek help, offer help, share help, and support these organizations that do this work. And join them and volunteer if you can. The Sonoma Pride needs an army of volunteers, and Grace is the right person to see. Rohnert Park and Cotati Pride need a squadron of volunteers. See us at the break. But just find it where it's next to you and just do that one thing.
Okay. This is a little bit of a serious question, important for Josh Patel Crocker or Chris. According to the American Progress Movement Advancement Project, LGBTQIA plus youth are overrepresented in juvenile justice facilities in the United States. 20% of all incarcerated youth identified as LGBTQ plus or gender nonconforming, and nearly 40% of incarcerated girls identify as LGBTQ plus. Do you see these disparities in your work, in the legal system? And what do you see as a solution to correct it or to help it? Thank you.
Okay, so, and I will have to use my notes for this because I'm currently in the family division. That we have a separate division that's the juvenile justice division over close by Oakmont. And we have a couple of judges over there, and as soon as I reached out, I can tell you I got an immediate response. I'll look into it. Let me find out the information you seek. So in speaking with my colleagues, they did also connect with the director of probation out there, and they are telling me that the statistics that were just read are not reflective of Sonoma County, that our numbers are lower, but they do acknowledge it is still a problem. Also, they shared with me additional information that when youth enter the secure treatment facility, upon the intake process, they are asked about gender identity and how they identify. And when determining housing, that comes into play. So transgender girls are housed with the girls. Also in the courtroom, they are recognizing gender identity and will check in with the minors and all the people who are the players in the room as to names to be used and pronouns to be used, and the judges are actually doing that. Also, probation has indicated that they will start tracking, or they've started a process to figure out how to start tracking so that we can make sure that our numbers are very low and certainly don't get as high as what we're hearing on the national average.
So in Sonoma County, I've worked for Santa Rosa PD for 18 years, like I said before. We don't see a high arrest rate of LGBTQ folks, especially youth in particular. The ones that we do see are typically not committing violent crimes. They're usually what I call committing survival crimes. And usually it's because they've been ostracized from their families or kicked out of homes. So usually it's theft. Sometimes it's sex for a place to stay. Sometimes it's trespassing. But it's really crimes to actually survive. In my history of working with Sonoma County courts, the DA's office, as well as judges, typically those kinds of crimes are usually mitigated and they're usually put into diversion programs or something where they can actually get resources, and ultimately those records are usually expunged or they're gotten rid of down the road because judges as well as prosecutors recognize the need is actually there for resources, and consequences through the criminal justice system aren't usually the most appropriate for those kinds of crimes. In my agency in particular, we brought actually LGBTQ Connections in about 2 years ago with Ian, who's hiding in the middle back over there. They came in and taught our entire management team just kind of a history of LGBTQ rights liberation movements and civil rights work, because a lot of our folks didn't understand, who were doing the daily work in law enforcement, why LGBTQ folks did not trust or like law enforcement and wouldn't call, or if they did, were apprehensive when law enforcement would show up. So bringing Ian and his team in to kind of have those conversations and holding law enforcement leaders accountable to those solutions and resources and giving them the information about where we could defer youth to, especially youth in crisis, was probably the best thing we could do. But it's something that doesn't happen in a lot of places, and it's something we need to definitely do more of in the future to make sure kids aren't incarcerated just because they're trying to survive.
This is for all speakers. Traditional power structures are often byproducts of white supremacy. How do you go about confronting those barriers to access that disproportionately affect queer people? More specifically, queer people of color. And Amie, can you start this time?
Yep, I think the being in education that has been so heteronormative over the years, we're part of what holds the problem into place. And so it's a very unique experience to be in education that holds a lot of these policing of bodies and defining of what's appropriate and what's inappropriate for different genders. You've got to figure out how to work within that system to change those minds, to change those practices. Right now we've got a partnership with the Human Rights Campaign, and happening today, a lot of them wish they could be here. We have a group of 45 educators in Sonoma County that are engaged in a 3-year project called Welcoming Schools, and this is all about helping educators confront their own bias, understand gender, understand how to talk about gender, but we've got to just start looking at those elements that are holding that into place. A lot of times it's mindsets, practices, policies, it's who's in the building, whose voice is heard, and start really changing the story for young people.
I think I want to shout out the allies, because I think that it is changing a mindset and a culture, and it takes a lot of time. And what starts with that is education, which can look like a whole bunch of different things, and creating space where people can learn what they need to learn in a comfortable way that works for them. And so I do a lot of tabling this month in all kinds of places, and it's so amazing. The last couple, I'm just going to tell the story. In the last couple of years, where like parents will come up and they'll say, my kid just came out 2 weeks ago, and this is a whole new world, and I know nothing, and they're so sweet, and it makes me tear up, because it's like, it's so touching that they're reaching out, they're looking, and they're starting from ground zero. And then I will give a shout out for volunteering. Thank you, Ron, because we have events all year long. We use volunteers all year long, but Pride Weekend, of course, we have over 100 volunteers. And from doing orientations and chatting with folks, because I can't ask people out, right? I'm told. I would say about at least 40% of our volunteers have never been to a Pride. They're allies. They're not part of the community, and they want to support. And sometimes they're not. They're like, do I belong there? Is it okay if I come? But volunteering is a safe, comfortable way for them to support the community. But it also, in that time, everybody is learning from one another, and like maybe having a conversation, when you're suffering under the hot sun with somebody that you typically may never would have been able to interact with.
I don't know if you can tell from there, the lights. I'm a white guy, so I don't have a whole lot to offer in that regard. But what I have learned over the years is, in order to be effective as a leader, you have to be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and have uncomfortable conversations to improve your own leadership style. So, for example, my agency works with the NAACP locally in Sonoma County. We work very well with their president and their vice president. Actually, their president sat on our promotional oral boards for sergeant candidates because we wanted to get that other perspective in there. But also because now we've built such a relationship, when she has a question about queer things or law enforcement things, she can come to me. When she has communities that are feeling frustrated with law enforcement, she can come to me. If I have questions that I don't understand when we're dealing with something, I can go to her, and we have a good back and forth relationship. But the one thing that she taught me more than anybody else in many recent years about folks who are people of color and dealing with law enforcement in particular is really be empathetic. So Kirsten will always say, like, hey, SRPD does great. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. We appreciate exactly what you're doing. We know you're following your policies. We agree with that particular. But how come that officer just wasn't empathetic? So when she's getting a complaint that an officer went out and someone had, not our agency, but a community member had used the N-word, for example, and then the officers get there and they're talking to that person, acknowledging that that is triggering and traumatic for that individual goes a long way. And so changing that culture to be empathetic is something we're really working on, and I think it can break down a lot of those systems by having those conversations.
I really want to acknowledge the history, the distrust in some of our communities and around some of these institutions. Some of them haven't done right by us. I also really want to acknowledge people like Chris, and there's people in the Roanoke Park Public Safety Department that have made a lot of effort to reach out. And so sometimes, again, it's finding those people that are doing better and encouraging it. Sometimes we walk around, everybody in this room, if you're an ally, you at least know what I'm talking about. There's a concept called minority stress. And we have it because we're not the people with power. We're not the people on the top. We don't see ourselves represented fairly in media. As a former white guy, I've sort of had to deal with, like, wow, that was a downgrade. Now I'm a girl in a wheelchair, and a trans girl at that. So, but still I know that these colonial forces, these patriarchal forces, they don't treat people fairly. And when we go to the grocery store, when we go to the bank, or when we go to apply for school, or when we have an interaction with law enforcement or some authority, no offense, there's more fear on our shoulders. And I don't like saying that we have to be prepared for it, but we just kind of have to be prepared for it. Don't pretend it doesn't exist, and don't let anybody BS you that it isn't the truth. When I go to the store, when I come home from the store, I share with my white cis wife with beautiful blue eyes, who was encouraging, who treated me like a people, and who didn't, who wouldn't look at me in the eye. And every one of those, I go and I make a little arrow to put in my quiver. So when I go out of my house, I have that arrow. I have those things to be prepared with. And I don't have one solid answer. Acknowledge the progress where it's there. Acknowledge what the fight. The struggle's real. It's long, and we're all in it. But do what you need to do to stand up, because we can change the world.
Do we have anybody else? Otherwise, before we go to the open questions, in one sentence, can you say what advice do you have for the up-and-coming queer leaders in our community? For everybody.
I think it's such a unique combination of what we have to do to lead. We have to be incredibly strong and take a lot of hits, and also incredibly vulnerable at the same time. And that space is very difficult to hold and emotionally difficult to hold. So I would encourage people to come out, to take on key positions, to be there as leaders for others, but also you need to engage in that self-care in order to be successful and thrive as a leader.
I'm finally going to give a short answer. Work to survive, play to thrive.
I think I would say know your power, because you all have it inside of you. Share that power with the people that are around you. Do not bring up the ladder behind you. Make sure that there's somebody with that ladder, that ramp, whatever you need to bring the next group of folks up there with you, because we can't do this alone.
Say, yeah, use the support of the folks who are already around you doing the work, and you're part of this really long journey of, you know, we have ancestors, and one day you'll be an ancestor. So you're a part of the work. Keep talking. We argue a lot. You know, I think, especially some of us, you know, some words that we use are outdated. So learn to, you know, teach us respectfully. know your history, and try to support one another.
I would say celebrate your individuality. If you can feel good about who you are and secure in yourself, then you're bringing your whole self to everyone around you.
Thank you. Well, we have some questions from the audience. Again, if you want to get any questions, you can still access the QR code. And also, we're going to have Dr. Garcia come up here for this part because she can also be part of this conversation. So language is a live organism. It changes. It keeps changing. And with that in mind, can you tell us to you, what's the difference between gay and queer?
So my definition, these are my definitions, not book definitions. Gay is a universal kind of umbrella for everyone who kind of falls under the tent. It does primarily tend to fall towards the men, in my opinion, but as the general one. When I was younger, I came out at 16. I liked the word queer for two reasons. One, it didn't make me feel like a 40-year-old gay man, which I am now. We all get there. And two, it made me feel different. It made me feel relevant. It made me feel just something else. I was taking a word back. So when someone asked what I was, I said queer. It made them listen just a little bit more, and that listening made me keep using it. It's just a way I've still related now for a lot of years.
I start a lot. We're probably not going to give one perfect answer for whoever asked this question. When I facilitate a lot of folks of the LGBT community coming to the table, I often start with, some of us use words that others are not comfortable with, or maybe it is outdated. Like I said, assume good intentions, gently correct, and explain why maybe this word is better than that word. A lot of folks, I personally don't use the word queer. I've tried because I think it's cute, but I can't. I'm almost 49, so it is because of when it came out in the history of the word. I don't mind at all when people use it, so I stick with LGBTQI+. Personally, I would like to use the word gay as the encompassing word. That word is offensive and not comfortable for a lot of folks, so I try not to use it as well. And then I will say, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but there's a word that I like to use for lesbians that I don't use in public, and I just use it within our community. I would say LGBTQI+, actually there's more to that than just that. It's safe to use, and I think queer is pretty safe to use-ish.
Yeah, probably not.
You can enroll at the class at Santa Rosa Junior College and visit our Queer Resource Center because I think precisely to that point, there's historical context to the language but in all seriousness, we do have some amazing classes that are cross-generational, right? That really put in this setting different generations of learners trying to be in that space. So,
I'm gonna jump right there, and there's no but Dr. Fleiss Hucks, who's here, she was my teacher of sexuality in society, and that's when I came out. I was part of the water polo team at the JC, and coming out to my teammates was really scary, but being in her class really helped me. And then later I went to her class and I would talk to the students. So sorry for butting in, but this is for Amie. So for Dr. Carter, are there local groups that do similar gender expression and sexuality competency, I can say that, trainings to the program your educators are going through? Is there any programs that your teachers are going through?
Yeah, so I think the one that we're most proud of is this, our partnership with the Human Rights Campaign. We have educators from Cloverdale, Sonoma, Healdsburg, all across the county that are really getting engaged deeply with this work with their own school staffs. But I would say beyond that, we have so many partnerships with our clubs for our LGBTQ students and their advocates on council. A lot of our schools have wellness centers, and those are centers where individuals can get both mental health resources or sexual health resources. So they are definitely out there. We have a website, I believe. The Sonoma County Office of Education has a website of a lot of local resources for LGBTQIA students. We're going to do our Pride flag raising here in June, and that's a moment where we really push those supports out and make sure that all our schools are aware of those.
Thank you. Now, this is for everybody. We know that homophobia, transphobia are tied to white supremacy. So how does this show up in your workplace? Can you talk about that? Anybody?
I'm retired. I think both Angélica and I, we're the first female leaders in our organizations in over 100 years. And like women had the right to vote, and still my role was occupied by a man. Our workforce is 80 to 90% female, and still these high positions tend to always be occupied by men. So as a queer and as a woman in my industry, I saw, men getting just opportunities for promotion and mentorship and acceleration and, rapidly rise to those positions. And I felt like I had to fight every single step of the way. And then there's just so much, again, in education that's heteronormative that holds that hierarchy into place. But I think that's part of the strength for those of us that walk that journey, is because you've already been rejected by the institution that you're in, you get the opportunity to really think critically about those elements and see them for what they are. So it's an opportunity to attack it. Yeah.
So the legal system certainly has been a strict binary for a very long time, and I can tell you it's changing. As 2015, I guess it's been a while now, 2015 there was a movement to change at least the family code, and then trickling into the other statutes to make it gender neutral. So where it says husband and wife, spouses, where it says mother, father, parents. It's a really simple change that has helped quite a bit. Our forms have followed suit. I'm still working hard on those few that need to be changed. So the forms are working as well. And in the courtroom, especially in mine, it is a safe space. And when I was an attorney and I was doing presentations to attorneys about how easy it is to tell the judge what your client needs. If they haven't legally changed their name or gender or both, you have to have the legal name on there as far as court records go, but it's so easy to just put a little asterisk. Let me see in the footnote, that's their legal name, but can you please address them as such and such in court? Easy done. It's a really quick fix. Also, judicial canons require us to maintain the integrity and impartiality of the court and to have our courtrooms free of bias, prejudice, and harassment. And I'm very focused on making sure that that is the case. And our canons also require us to continually educate ourselves on issues as they change. And I recently had to go to judicial training, and I can tell you every single training I've had has not only had a cultural sensitivity section where they spend time on it, but also an LGBTQI section. So I'm really encouraged in our state what we're doing to educate the legal system. And one other thing I want to share is that the diversity on the bench has grown immensely in the past year and a half. This is I am the second of 2 lesbians on the bench. We have a third joining us in January. Never seen that in our county's history. As well as starting in January, for the first time in the county's history, we will have more women than men on the bench.
One thing I wanted to share is, because you said in terms of white supremacy, heteronormativity. So I feel like gay couples, queer couples, but I feel like we had to construct protecting our families before the laws could do that. And so what I want folks to hear, if you haven't, if you're, you have the privilege of this. So, my wife and I, we are registered domestic partners in 2 states because we were registered domestic partners here, legally married in California, went up to Oregon, had to become registered domestic partners in Oregon in order for the benefits to count, and then had to get living trust, because as soon as we knew that we were going to cross state border, Oregon wasn't necessarily going to recognize my parental rights. So, and even between our two daughters, our oldest was born in 2010, and I had to legally adopt our daughter. I had to go through a third-party agency. We had to have home visits. I had to have people give character references for me in order to adopt my own child. And until you have to go through something like that to prove that you are worthy of parenting your child and having folks come in, and there was the kind of the heteronormative perspective, there was the, I was a Latina perspective, right? There just all of that tied into it. And then 5 years later, this is how it feels like it's changed a lot. 5 years later, we're like bracing for it, not to mention the thousands of dollars that it cost to go through that process. But 5 years later, our youngest daughter was born, and it was different. Now at that point, we didn't have to go redo the birth certificate because my name could be on it from the beginning. I didn't have to go through the whole process. And I will tell you, I was already gearing up for it again when our second daughter was born, and I did have this sense of relief. But that's an example of like how when the heteronormative structure just dominates all things. So I wanted to share that. I know you were asking from a work perspective, but I think when we, as agencies, we employ a workforce, we have to be aware of how we're setting up how employees can expect their families to be recognized in that kind of way. And then because I have the mic, I'm going to totally say this. I have to correct something because my wife was like, why did you say this? So in my presentation, I said blended family. We are not a blended family. I was trying to allude to the fact that families are blood, they're made. I did not birth my daughters, but they are my daughters, right? So I was more trying to say we were a diverse family. And so I do not want to misrepresent blended families in the room in my comment. So, okay, I'm done.
Thank you. For more on that, wait for the article in La Voz that we talked about it. So this is a nice question. So as a queer person, what brings you joy? What brings euphoria to you as a queer person?
So in the last 4 years, I'm going to make a plug for something else because everyone else got to. In the last 4 years in particular, I found a lot of pleasure in bringing community together, and I didn't realize it was something I enjoyed doing so much. So I didn't build it, but we have a local LGBTQ bowling league that happens from September all the way to May. Some of our bowlers are in here now. It was set up, I believe, by some of our lesbian sisters of our community. Cheryl did it years ago. A couple of years ago, my husband and I kind of started taking over some of the reins and like bringing more people in. The thing I found so much joy in it was like it started out with about 13 teams of 4. If you're good at math, that's 52, maybe. I'm gay, not so good at math. We started taking the league over, doing more stuff, bringing more people in, and we average now roughly about 100 to 110 bowlers that come every Tuesday to spend time together. And sometimes it's not just the bowlers that are there, but it's their friends, their family, their other queer communities. And then what we did was we started actually highlighting and reaching out to other LGBTQ-owned businesses, and every week another LGBTQ-owned business sponsors a week. So then we educate our community about other safe community spaces that exist. So to me, making sure that other people who are queer, LGBTQ, trans, know we're safe spaces for them to go to eat to recreate at, or to stay at is immensely important to me, and I found a lot of pleasure in bringing those kind of communities together.
I think, if you've ever had to live life in the closet, it's so just complex and draining to the soul. And so I think one of the things that just gives me joy is just being able to be out and be authentic. That is a privilege that I have not always felt like I've been able to have in my life, to just speak my truth and be myself. And so I just never want to take that for granted. And it's a good reminder of all the fighting that had to take place for me to even be able to say that and be able to sit here today.
Yeah, for me, really, it's being able to be out myself, to go to the local diner, nothing special, and nobody looks at me like anything special, truckers, rednecks, and they're just like, how do you want your eggs? And then to go to a festival or to go anywhere just down the street and see beautiful, beautiful queer people holding hands and loving one another, in the sunlight, right out loud in a way that they couldn't when I was young. And then finally, for me, just this week, Eurovision had this amazing trans artist from Ireland, and she was not tame. She did not hold back her sexuality, her power, her beauty. And here's all these Irish soccer hooligans holding up the flag and cheering for her. So when I say you can change the world has changed, baby, and we're changing it some more. That brings me joy.
Just connection with different identities that I, reaching out to my LGBT community, my Filipino American community, and my widow community. I'm 24/7 every single day of my life. I know that all the things I get to enjoy about my life is because of the people that came before me. That's all.
I echo the being out and being comfortable to be out. One other thing that just came up actually that was really timely last week, I ran into an old client and he came up to me at my car and said, "Are you Gina Crocker?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You did my name and gender change." And I didn't even recognize him. And I said, "Oh, well, how are you doing?" And his little 10-year-old son came up and he said, hey, this is the lady that did my name and gender change. So his little 10-year-old knew about it as well. And he was like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." So polite. And I said, "Well, how are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm doing great. I've got a great job. My wife is awesome. I've got 2 kids," and on and on and on. It was just wonderful. And I said, "You just made my day." And he was reaching in for a hug and he said, "You made my life." And I couldn't even, for a minute, we embraced in a hug for quite a long time. And I took that home with me and I told my family and I said, "You can make a difference in the biggest way and you don't even realize you're doing it, but you can do it."
Do I really have to go after that? No, that's beautiful. Well, I'm gonna share too, because originally I was gonna say I love to read, and so I love reading stories that center gay and lesbian and trans community. So anytime, and I'm not ashamed. I love romance as a genre. So I always love it when they're nuanced that way. But the other piece I want to share, one of the things that I found, so a couple of weeks ago I invited some colleagues at Santa Rosa Junior College. I asked if they would be interested in sitting down with me because I wanted to talk with them about kind of their experience living in the county, because I just moved here 10, 11 months ago. So I'm like, what do I know about being gay, queer in Sonoma County? And what I will say is that that was a really joyful moment. It was beautiful because there were all kinds of communities represented, and language that was being used was, talking about, in a Native community, Two-Spirit, in trans community, kind of the ways in which trans community gets silenced, the gay, the lesbian. And what brought me joy in that space was we were connecting as people with our own lived experience and not necessarily our roles. And I think that anytime we can do that, we're all better for it.
Thank you. Well, so many good questions, but we have run out of time, so we have time for one more. Healthcare seems to be a challenge, particularly for the trans population. How can we be advocates for gender-affirming care?
It has come a long way. It really has. We have an amazing gender clinic in Santa Rosa. Dr. Aruna McCauley at Santa Rosa Health at the Lombardi Clinic. We have amazing resources, and it used to be you had to go to Colorado or to Sweden or something to get gender-affirming surgery. And now I understand I could go to Marin, which is an improvement, I'm sure. But there's still, a lot of work, and it's one of those things where what was okay language, what was okay care 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is still not okay, Like somebody said, I got a mammogram, rite of passage as a woman, and she says, "Oh, your breasts look like a real woman's." And I'm like, okay, thank you. I'm sure you meant that well. I have to get letters from doctors and psychologists if I want to get my nose done so it's prettier. If I want to get boobs, which some women do, same thing. I have to go before a panel of elders to make sure that it's okay for me to do that. So there's just so many things, all the way from just if, how I feel when I buy lipstick. Now I just buy it. Who cares? But there's so many ways in which you don't know. I didn't know that trans people have to go through extra hoops. Is it to protect us? Is it colonial, nationalist, white supremacy, reifying a kind of Christianity that I think we're all tired of? There's good kinds, don't get me wrong. But some of all these little ways, the name changes that we need to have, I'm not saying it's harder, it's easier now, it is. But all these little ways that we have to do more, just be aware and be sensitive to it. And if you're in a position where you provide healthcare or you provide the form you have to fill out or any of that, gender neutral language goes a long way, or just asking someone how they want to be addressed, or assuming that if I'm a grown adult, I can get my own nose job without getting checked to see if I'm crazy.
I wanted to just share an example. So at the JC recently, in our athletics division, we have an organization across the state, the 3C2A, California Community College Athletic Association. And one of the things that has come up is recognition around physicals. And I know I'm not going to say all the appropriate language. So afterwards, if you want to know more, I'll direct you to my colleagues who are working on this. But I want to tell you, this is what it looks like to take leadership into your own hands. So we have a faculty member who leads our sports medicine department. The entire athletics, we're talking about what do we need to do that's in compliance with our organization, but is in the best interest of students. And so then that conversation starts in one department. It goes into an academic space, academic senate space. We could talk about a resolution. Well, how are we going to do this as a district? What are our policies? What are our procedures? And we are still growing and working through that, but it happens in collaboration. So I think this notion of, I know the question was centered around healthcare, and this one actually does involve physical screenings and whether or not trans students can participate in which sport or another. But I think in any moment that you can exercise whatever place you are in to advance, that is always going to be in the best interest of the community. And so you don't have to be of the trans community to support and love trans community, right? You don't have to be identify, like the A, I think means a lot of things, but ally is one of the components. So it's that notion of you don't have to be in roles in where we might be. It might just be in your friend group in your neighborhood, and you're creating space. So I wanted to note that, but if you wanted to learn more about that with athletics, you can talk to me afterwards, and I have two amazing colleagues here who did some amazing work that I think is a model for what's happening across California community colleges. Just support trans.
Thank you. That's a lovely way to start the winding down and ending up today's. And on that note, and in that spirit, you're here because you care. So before you leave today, make sure that you say hello to somebody you don't know. Make the network that we have stronger and firmer. And let's remember, this is a time where we're divided more than ever, so we have to stick together. We have to work together. And always just talk. Let's move forward. And on that note, let me see, I think that we're going to have some closing remarks.
Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Chase. I'm a board of directors member at Cien. I'm also the director of development at Positive Images. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for being in this space with us and sharing this room with us. If you are willing and able to, I would love to see all of our queer leaders in the room stand or raise their hand to be recognized for their incredible work in this community. And if you're a queer person in this room, you are a leader, period, because you're here. So I'd love to give a round of applause for all of the folks in our room that make this vibrant queer community so powerful and so special. Thank you all so much. I also want to take the time to thank our events coordinator, Ellen Velasquez-Moraes, for all of her incredible hard work on this event that I know means a lot to her. Shout out to Ellen, our superstar. I also want to remind you of a few things Cien has coming up. First of all, we have the Fiesta al Cien coming up. It's our Pride kickoff party. Shout out to Grace and the Sonoma County Pride team for collaborating on that. It'll be an excellent, very fun time. I encourage you to go. It will also be a fundraiser for the LGBTQ Therapy Fund, which Positive Images and On the Margins holds. It's a revolutionary program where queer people in our county are able to receive not only free therapy, but free therapy that is culturally and trauma-informed. We also have Puente Iguanas coming up. Tickets are now available for that. And I just want to say thank you again for taking up space with us today and making it known that we're here and we're queer and we love it. Also, if anybody would like to donate a prize for a raffle for the Priesta al Cien, it'll be an incredible time. I hope to see you all there. Thank you all so much for coming.